Perfect. Okay, gentlemen, we are studying Sugya number 4. Sugya number 4 will probably take us through classes. We'll split it into two. It's a little long. And, whenever you study law, whenever you study Gemara, Halakha, doesn't matter whether it's Hilchot Tefillin, Hilchot Shabbat, Hilchot Shavuot, you always want to try to find the underlying legal principles that you can use and apply in different situations, right? And once you understand those underlying legal principles, then you really have a solid command of the topic. Now, one of the problems in studying the Mishna we're studying is Shalaim Hazin B'Talet. We have two people grabbing a talet, and the halakha is that they both have to make a shavua. And the question is, what is the basis of that shavua? There are general rules that determine when somebody has to make a shavua and when you don't have to make a shavua. We're going to study those rules tonight, by the way, right? Not all of them, but the primary ones. And it happens to be that the Mishnah doesn't seem to follow any of the general rules. So again, you have two people come, they're grabbing Reuven is grabbing one end, Shimon is grabbing the other end of the talet, and we say both of them make a shavua. Why? Why should they make a shavua? What rule in the laws of shavua is that following? That's going to be the topic of today's class, okay? I just want to remind you that a few weeks ago, this is before Pesach, Rabbi Yochanan actually addressed that question. At the end of the second Sugya, Rabbi Yochanan said, do you know what general rule our Mishnah follows when it says the two of them have to make a shavua? It doesn't follow any general rule. You remember Rabbi Yochanan what he said? He says, this is a special circumstance, and the Shavuah was instituted by the Chachamim for the following reason. Because if there was no Shavuah, if you said just split it 50-50. So let's say there's a small guy just found something, he picks it up, and the big guy knows, wait, if I go to court and I claim that I own 50%, what's going to happen? I claim that I own the whole thing, rather. They're going to split it 50-50. So the big guy's going to come, he's like, give me that. I was like, what are you doing? I got it first. Okay, let's go to court. The judge says, what happened? I got it first. No, I got it first. No Shavuah. So Rabbi Yochanan said, in order to prevent that type of situation, where people are going to be, like punching and fighting, and in order to prevent that, we required that they make a Shavuah, and nobody's going to come to court and just make a false testimony, a false oath. They make a false testimony. They won't make a false oath because that's very severe. So that's why. So Rabbi Yochanan basically is saying there is no general rule that this Shavuah follows. It's a special Shavuah due to the special situation. And that's what we studied, as I said, about a month ago. So I want you to open up the papers, and I copied for you the first page. Hilchot Torah B'Nitante. Is that what it is, Mikey? Yes? Perfect, great. And I'm going to read to you in these a few short paragraphs all the laws, the general laws of Shavuah. It's really simple. I mean, there's a lot of details, right? This Hilchot Torah B'Nitante goes on for many, many chapters, but this will just give you the primary rules that you need to know. All right, so here it goes. Rule number one. Hato'en et havero b'metaltelin v'hoda lo b'miksatan harezeh meshalem ma shehoda bo. There is a rule, and the rule is as follows. If Reuven comes to Shimon and says, you owe me $100. If Shimon says, I don't owe you a penny, Shimon gets to walk out of court, and that's it. He doesn't have to make a shavua, he doesn't have to pay anything, he walks out. It's his word against his word. What's the principle? You say that the guy owes you money, prove it. Otherwise, I can go into court. You owe me money. Prove it. So they can't prove it. Okay. But if Reuven goes into court and he says, Shimon owes me money, and Shimon says, I don't owe him. Reuven says, you owe me $100. Shimon says, you know what? I owe him $50. That's called modeh b'miksat. According to the Torah, this is a deoraita law. Modeh b'miksat ta'ana. If you admit partial liability, you have to pay what you admitted, obviously, pay it, but you have to make a shavua regarding the remaining portion. Understand the law? So again, the Reuven comes in, you owe me $100. Shimon says, no, enough of this. Come on, you know I owe you $50, I don't owe you $100. Okay, pay the 50. Pay the 50. Make a shivua about the remaining 50. That's called modeh.
So if you're guilty, they won't kill you. They'll just break your legs.
They'll just break your legs. Modeh b'miksata ta'ana. What does it mean? That he admitted part of the liability. I like that. He admitted part of the liability, and he has to pay what he admits. Obviously, he has to make a shivua with respect to the remaining. That's the first law. Second law. Look at the page. V'chen. Im kafar bakol. The rule was, if he denied everything. Again, the Reuven comes in, you owe me $100. She wants to say, I don't owe you a penny. But Reuven this time comes from his friend Ribbi. Now, usually in Jewish law, how many edim do you need? 2. He doesn't have 2 edim. By the way, if he had 2 edim, nobody has to make a shavua. If Reuven comes into court, he tells Shimon, you owe me $100. Shimon says, I don't owe you a penny. And I know I studied the laws. I went to Rabbi Foda's class. I can walk out of court now. Reuven says, hold on, I have 2 witnesses here. Yisachar v'Zevulun, they're going to testify that you owe me $100. He has to pay $100. There's no shavua at that point. You don't need a shavua because you have al pi shenayim edim yakum davar. If you have 2 witnesses, that establishes a fact. Judicial facts are established in Jewish courts by witnesses. And now we know, and we've spoken about this before, how because of the modern technology, video proofs don't mean anything anymore. You go to court, you could have fabricated the video. How do you know? There's no way to know. They do deep fakes now of movie actors. This movie actor said this movie actor said that. It's unbelievable. They had this Joe Rogan video, and it's basically AI talking like Joe Rogan and saying, I am not Joe Rogan. I know I sound like him. You think I'm him, but I am not Joe Rogan. I am actually AI, which is imitating Joe Rogan. It's unbelievable. So the Torah, this is the wisdom of the Torah. You see the eternal wisdom of the Torah. The Torah says, you have to have 2 witnesses who actually saw it, not with the camera, right? They actually saw it with their eyes. You understand?
Does it make a difference if the witnesses are your family members or friends?
Yes, it does, because there are situations where if the eid is nogea badavar, if there's some sort of kirva, we won't let him testify. You're correct about that. There's details, but let's say Yisachar and Zebulun come up to Reuven. They're not related to Reuven. They come in and they say, yeah, we know for a fact that Shimon borrowed $100 from Reuven, so he's going to have to pay. Okay, so those 2 cases are simple. Again, the first case, he denies everything. Second case, he admits part of the liability. Third case, there's 2 witnesses, so that's 3 cases. There's a 4th case, and that's the last case. And after this, you're all going to be experts in the laws of Shavuot. So this is a 4th case. You ready for it?
Which one?
4th case. What's that?
The same, whatever, if it's your mother-in-law. Mark Masher.
Is the camera on?
They can't see, but they can hear.
Okay, this is the 4th and final case. The Ed Echad Me'id Shehayu. Reuven comes into court now with 2 witnesses. He comes with 1 witness. This is a deoraita law. What we're saying now is not rabbinic, it's a deoraita law. Harezeh nishba min Torah. So again, Reuven comes into court, he says, Shimon, you owe me $100. Shimon says, I don't owe you a penny. Reuven says, well, I got a witness, his name is Levi. And Levi stands before the judge and he says, I know for a fact that Shimon owes him $100. He borrowed $100 from him. According to halacha, that witness cannot establish a fact. We know you need 2 witnesses, this is just 1 witness, but that 1 witness can cause Shimon to have to make a shavua. And now the judge says, make a shavua. You say you don't have money. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to make a shavua. I'll just pay him the money, right? Or maybe he'll make a shavua. But so now you're all experts in the laws of Shavuot. I just summarized the laws for you. That's what you need to know to understand the Sugya. So we're going to start the Sugya. We're going to study it. And one of the things I have to tell you about studying Gemara, we're about to start, is Gemara teaches you how to think. And the Chachamim, and you're going to see it in this Sugya, we're not going to finish the Sugya today, but the Chachamim were masters of rhetoric. It's really important to be sensitive to the way people use language. Because when you're sensitive to the way people use language, you see right through the sham. There's a certain sham going on, there's a certain scam going on, and everybody does it. And I'm talking about politicians, I don't mean in personal life, maybe, whatever. But at least politicians do it, leaders do it. And when you're sensitive to language, you realize how absurd everything they're saying is. And the Gemara, the Chachamim and the Gemara, they were masters of language. That's what makes the Gemara great. It teaches you how to think. I'll just give you one quick example. There was an unfortunate situation, I think it was 2 Sundays ago in Chicago. There was hundreds of youth rampaging through the city, stoning things, attacking people, attacking cars,
Not Chicago,
smashing,
Rabbi. Not Chicago.
smashing things. And so I heard the reaction of the politicians, and this is a great example. And they were saying, yes, the young people today need safe spaces where they can, where they can be. They have to be in safe spaces. I just found it so interesting. You see, like how the manipulation of language, and this is why studying Gemara is so important, because when you study Gemara, you can't be manipulated anymore. It frees you from the manipulation. The young people need safe spaces, right? No, they don't need safe spaces. We need the safe spaces because they're violent. They're attacking people, right? But you see how they flip it? They need the safe spaces. So now, like in your mind, like, you become all confused. Yeah, I guess they need safe spaces. No, they don't. They're violent thugs. They should be thrown into jail. We should be safe from them. They don't need to be safe from us, right? But you get the sketch. So when you study Gemara, you'll see how our Gemara is going to do that. It's going to analyze a particular type of reasoning, and it's going to really go deeply into the logical inferences and show how they really don't make sense, or apparently don't make sense. It's going to be a lot of that type of analysis of rhetoric. So just so you know, this is a great sugya. I love it for that reason. As I said, it frees you from the nonsense of the world around you. So let's start the sugya. Tane Ribbi Hiya. Everybody have the place? Tane Ribbi Hiya. Okay, Tane Ribbi Hiya. Mane li beyadecha. So Ribbi Hiya was a student. He wasn't just a regular student. He was what's called a Talmid Chaver. Talmid Chaver means if you have a student, the Chacham has a student, but the Chacham also learns from the student because the student is very bright and very intelligent. So Ribbi Hiya was the Talmid Chaver of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. You remember Rabbeinu HaKadosh was the author of the Mishna. Ribbi Hiya was the Talmid Chaver, and one of the things he did, and this was a life project for Ribbi Hiya, he looked at the Mishnayot of his teacher, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he composed the book called the Tosefta. And that book is an elaboration on the Mishnah. So his purpose was to explain the Mishnayot that his teacher wrote. So he wrote the book, the Tosefta, and he had his own collection of Baraitot. When my father passed away, Alav Shalom, so my father wrote a really difficult book. It was called Golden Doves and Silver Dots. And so one of the things I did after he passed away is I took it upon myself, to explain the entire book online. So I just yesterday or today I did class 102, right? So 102 classes since he passed away. We're 1/3 into the book, or 1/4 into the book. So Ribbi Hiya, he looked at the Mishnayot, he realized it's really dense. It's very difficult to understand it because it was written in such a dense way. So he wrote the Tosefta in order to explain the Mishnayot. So many of the Baraitot of Ribbi Hiya were there to explain something of the Mishnayot. That's one of these Baraitot. Let's read the Baraita. Tane Ribbi Hiya means this is his private Baraita. It's his private halacha that he used to teach, and here it is. Maneli be'adecha. Here's the situation. Reuven comes into court. He looks at Shimon. He says, "You owe me $100." Okay? Ve'ala omer. Shimon answers, "En lecha be'adi kelum. I don't owe you anything." Okay. Ve'ha'idim me'idim oto sheyesh lo 50 zuz. He doesn't come with one witness. He comes with 2 witnesses.
Oh, wow.
Okay? And he says, the witnesses, they say, listen, we don't know about $100. We know about $50. $50 we know about. We know that he gave him a $50 loan. And when they say, no, I gave him 2 $50 loans. The witnesses say, listen, we know one of the loans. We're here to testify what we know. We can't testify what we don't know. So they testify, we know that he owes him $50. Okay? He pays him $50. Noten lo 50 zuz. The question is as follows. If he would have come with one witness, what would have been the law?
The witness can make him do the shibboleth.
The witness can make him do the shibboleth, but he can't make him pay because one witness can't make him pay. Correct. If he would have come with no witnesses, but he himself admitted, I owe you $50, he would have had to pay the $50 and make a shibboleth. So the Ribbi Hiya is saying, look,
2 witnesses.
if he himself is admitting that he owes $50, and that admission is enough to force him to make a shibboleth, then if 2 witnesses come and they force him to pay $50, they should also be able to force him to make a shibboleth. That's what the Ribbi Hiya is saying. Okay? Does everybody understand? Or do I need to repeat it? I'll be happy to repeat it. I'm going to repeat it again. Okay. If Reuven came into court with no witnesses, Shimon would have said, I owe him $50. What's the law? He pays him $50. But because he admitted part of the liability, he has to make a shibboleth. We say if somebody admits part of the liability, you have to make a shavua. So he pays the $50, then he makes a shavua. I don't owe him another penny. I gave him the $50. Leave me alone. He takes the Sefer Torah. He makes the shavua. I don't owe him another penny. That's it. Shimon leaves the court. Doesn't have to pay him any more money. Okay, that's clear. Now, two witnesses come to court, and they say Shimon owes him $50. So you all agree that he has to pay the $50. Obviously, it's two witnesses. Does he have to make a shavua?
No.
Does he have to make a shavua? So that's the question that our Gemara is dealing with. Ribbi is saying yes. Why is Ribbi saying yes? If the person's admission, it's a fortiori reasoning, and I'm going to explain it soon, this type of reasoning, and I had a dialogue with ChatGPT, which I will share with you. If the witness himself, not the witness, I'm sorry, the defendant, Shimon, if Shimon himself said, I owe the $50, that would be enough for him to be forced to make a shavua, right? So if two witnesses come and say he owes $50, that should be enough to force him to make a shavua.
So bring 2 over 1 then?
Right? Yeah.
Why bring 2?
No, because the two witnesses also cause him to pay. One witness can only force a shavua. Here there's two witnesses, so they force him to pay, and he's got to pay. But now, according to the Hiya, they can force him to make a shavua on the remaining $50, right? That's what the Hiya says. V'yishava al hashel. That's a chidush. That's an interesting law. We don't know what the halacha is yet, but that's the Hiya's point. And what's yes?
What this may mean is that two witnesses is the equivalent of an admission?
Yes. Two witnesses should at least be equal to an admission. If his own admission would have forced him to make a shavua, how much more so that two witnesses should be able to force him to make a shavua? Exactly. That is called kal v'chomer. I will explain it soon. Shelo teheh hoda'at piv gedola meha'ada'at edim mikal v'chomer. Because otherwise it would be an absurd situation where his admission would have more legal force than two witnesses. Because if you didn't say that he has to make a shavua with two witnesses, it would come out that if he admits that he owes the $50, he has to pay the $50 and make a shavua. And you're telling me that if two witnesses come and they force him to pay $50, he doesn't have to make a shavua? That doesn't make any sense. That's the kal v'chomer. So that's the point of Ribbi Hiya. And here, I know you're asking yourself, how is this connected to our Mishnah? Okay, this is really good. How is this connected to our Mishnah? It's a very subtle point. I want you to listen and hear what the Gemara says, because again, Ribbi Hiya was a student of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and always his main cause or his main goal was to explain the Mishnah in a very subtle way. So look at the subtlety of this point. Betana tuna, the person reciting our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Right? Our Mishnah was two people, Reuven and Shimon, are grabbing a talet, right? One says, I found it first. Shimon says, no, I found it first, right? That was our Mishnah. Let's see. Now look at it like this. Let's use Ribbi Hiya's reasoning towards our Mishnah. What do we have? We have kevan de tafis. Somebody is grabbing the talet on one side, right? Let's just look at Reuven for a second. Reuven is grabbing the talet. Let's look at it for a second. What do we see? We're in court. Anan sahadeh. We're witnesses. We're now those two witnesses. Demai de tafis ha'idideu. We know that what Reuven is grabbing, it's his. We see it with our own eyes, right? He's grabbing the talet. So that part of the talet that he's grabbing belongs to him. Maybe the other part belongs to Shimon. But what Reuven is grabbing is his. And what do we say the halacha was? Reuven and Shimon? What's the halacha? They may have to make a shavua. Why?
Asking 50%.
So look at it this way. You're going to like this once you catch it. Reuven is holding 50% of the talet, right? $50 worth of the talet. He says what? The whole thing belongs to me. We know he's holding 50%. We're witnesses. We're like the witnesses that came into court and say, yeah, we know that he is owed $50. We know that because Shimon says, I don't owe him anything. The whole talet is mine. But we see Reuven holding 50% of the talet. And the witnesses are there. We're the witnesses who see that he's holding 50% of the talet. So according to that reasoning, Reuven now can force Shimon to make a shavua. Do you see the reasoning? Again, we are now the witnesses, and we see that Reuven says, the $100 or the 100% of the talet is mine, right? and we see he has $50, and witness says Reuven owns $50. He owns 50% of the talet. We already see that. We're like those two witnesses. And what did Hiya say? That if you have two witnesses who come in and they substantiate a claim, or 50% of a claim, we can force the other side, the defendant, to make a shivu'ah with respect to the remaining part of the claim. So that's why Shimon has to make a shivu'ah to Reuven. But if you flip it around now, Shimon now is holding 50% of the talet, and Shimon can force Reuven to make a shivu'ah to him. So you see how the Mishnah, in a very subtle way, follows the Hiya. It's really like brilliant. I gotta tell you, like, you have to think about this a few times. Listen to the recording if you didn't get it now, because it's like it really is amazing. I have to tell you, by the way, like when I retire, I just want to study Gemara all day. That's what I want. That's what I want to do. So okay, let's continue. Any questions at this point?
50%, I mean,
You
you're
not
not,
know they're going to own 50% because we're both fighting.
Again, look, instead of think of it, Reuven and Shimon holding.
You own 50, so now I can force you to make a shivu'ah and you're 50, and you're going to force me.
Exactly.
I know I'm taking 50 no matter what.
Exactly.
They can make you make one also.
Yeah.
Exactly. Both ways. Both ways. It goes both ways. Exactly. You see, think of the talet. Think of Reuven holding his side of the talet. He says the whole talet belongs to me. It's like the guy who goes into court. Reuven goes into court and he says Shimon owes me $100. Right? Now we see that Reuven is holding on to $50. So now we're like the two witnesses who say, yeah, you know what, Reuven, we're going to testify that Shimon owes you $50. Namely, the part of the talet that's yours is yours. You're holding it. Now that forces Shimon to make a shivu'ah for the other part of the talet. But then we flip it on the other side. Now Shimon can say, wait, hold on, I'm holding 50% of the talet, and I want the whole talet. And we're all witnesses that he owns. He's holding 50% of the talet, and therefore he owns it, and therefore he can force a shivu'ah to the Reuven. So you see the subtlety. Rabbi Hiya's point is really an amazing. It's an amazing analysis of our Mishnah.
If there's two witnesses, he still needs to make a shivu'ah.
Yes, exactly, correct. Okay, so now, so we said that this is a logical inference, and the logical inference being, why does the Hiya say that two witnesses can force the defendant to make a shivu'ah? The logical inference is based upon the fact that there is a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer literally means a fortiori reasoning. What is the a fortiori reasoning? I didn't explain it yet, but there's an a fortiori reasoning here that says, if Shimon, through his own admission, that he owes $50 to Reuven, that would have been enough to force Shimon to make a shivu'ah. A fortiori, that if two witnesses come in and they say Shimon owes $50 to Reuven, that they can force Shimon to make a shivu'ah. What is the kal v'chomer? We didn't say what the kal v'chomer is yet, and I want to explain to you what a fortiori reasoning is. Okay, for those of you who speak Latin. A fortiori comes from strength, right? So, but in English you have the word forte. I think you have, right? Forte, what is fort? What is a fort? A place of strength. So what is a fortiori reasoning? A fortiori reasoning is a type of logical inference that draws a conclusion based on a stronger premise than the one given. I will explain, I'll give you like a good example. Let's say you have a car, and I want to buy the car, and I want to borrow your car, and I have to drive 100 miles. It's a full tank. And I ask you, how many miles can your car go on this full tank? You tell me it can go 150 miles. If it can go 150 miles on a full tank, a fortiori, then it can go 100 miles on a full tank, right? Right? Because you have the weak premise, and you have the strong premise, right? So the kal v'chomer. You see, kal means light. Chomer means very strict, very heavy. So kal v'chomer is literally a translation of a fortiori reasoning. I want to give you a conversation I had with ChatGPT about this, only for the fun of it. But it also illustrates that a fortiori reasoning is. Okay. ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, can you give me an example of fortiori reasoning? And of course, you know how ChatGPT is. Yes, of course, it would be a pleasure to do so. And here's what it writes. Okay. Let's say there is a law that imposes a fine of $100 for jaywalking on a regular street. So a jaywalker on a regular street, how much does he have to pay? $100. Do they get tickets here for jaywalking in the city? Never seen that.
Not yet.
I remember the first time I was in Israel, and I was very surprised when I lived in Israel because I didn't know. So I once saw somebody jaywalking, and I saw the cops jumping out and catching him. Like, what happened? Like, drugs? No, jaywalking. I'm like, okay, so I knew, like, don't jaywalk in Israel. If you jaywalk in Israel, you can get a ticket. Okay, anyway, so continuing with ChatGPT. So it says they impose a fine of $100 for jaywalking on a regular street. Now imagine there was a busy highway with much higher risks and dangers to pedestrians. It can be argued a fortiori that the fine for jaywalking on the highway should be greater than $100, as the risks and dangers are much greater. That's the a fortiori reasoning. If what? You what? You don't like it? Okay, but you see the a fortiori reasoning? If on a regular street the fine is $100, then on a highway, if somebody jaywalks on a highway, the fine should be greater than $100. That's what the ChatGPT said. Well, you know?
It's probably on crack if it's on the highway.
Okay, let me tell you what I answered ChatGPT. I don't like the example because you suggested in your example that the fine for jaywalking on the highway should be greater than the fine for jaywalking on a regular street. That is not a fortiori reasoning. If you were arguing that the fine for walking on the highway would be $100, the same fine that is imposed for walking on the street, that would be a fortiori reasoning, right? That, my point to ChatGPT is, a fortiori means you're taking the same conclusion and you're saying if this conclusion works in the light case, of course it should work in the heavy case. But you told me that if in the light case the fine is $100, in the heavy case the fine should be greater. ChatGPT's answer to me, you're absolutely right. I apologize for the confusion. It's not over. My answer to ChatGPT, you should study Talmud.
Oh my God.
If you did, you would not make that type of error. ChatGPT has an AI language model. I do not have personal experiences or beliefs, nor am I capable of studying in the traditional sense. However, I strive to continuously learn and improve my knowledge and understanding of various subjects, including Talmudic law and reasoning.
Wow.
Right, I appreciate your feedback and will do my best to ensure greater accuracy. I wanted to write him back, you are a Judde, but I stopped. I think you understand what that means. Anyway. No, because come on, like you're giving this example, you're an AI. You don't know what a fortiori reasoning is? Like, I'm sorry, like this was inexcusable. It's just a logical inference. And anyway, but the point, you see the point I'm saying about studying Gemara. When you study Gemara, the Gemara deals exactly with this type of mistake. The Gemara deals with different types of Kal Vachomer, and it says that the Kal Vachomer of ChatGPT, it deals with that type of, and it says it's not a Kal Vachomer. That's how I knew to answer it. I just studied that Sugya. So.
Did you ask the question again to see if you get different reasoning the second time
They
around?
correct themselves?
It was kind of funny, but anyway, so you see what a fortiori reasoning is, right? A fortiori reasoning, if a person who robbed a store, unarmed robber, gets a year in jail, a fortiori, that an armed robber should get at least a year in jail. You can't say a fortiori that he should get 2 years in jail. That's not a fortiori, right? A fortiori means if in the light case this happens, at least it should happen in the heavy case. All right. Right, now you see the, right. Were you laughing about that? Because,
No, it was very comedic.
All right, so let's look at the fortiori reasoning of, all right, we're going to look at the fortiori reasoning in a minute, but you should know that there is another position on the matter. So we said that according to the Hiya, again, 2 witnesses come in, they say Shimon, the defendant, we don't know that he owes 100. We don't know about that. We know he owes 50. So they testify and they force Shimon to make a shuvah. That's the Hiya's position. That is not the position that is universally acknowledged. And here now we're going to study the counter position. Why would you say that the 2 witnesses cannot force a shuvah? So now we're going to take a deep dive into the thinking of the Torah. What did the Torah say? The Torah said that if Shimon the defendant admits that he owes $50, his admission would compel him to make a shavua. What's this? What's the reasoning behind that? But the Torah has a reason, right? We don't know the reason for everything. There's a lot of things in the Torah we don't know. And even when we know something about the mitzvot, we don't know everything. But this has to do with dinei mamonot. There must be some underlying reasoning that we can understand, and there is. And that underlying reasoning was given by a Hacham called Rabba. Rabba, or that's his short name in the Gemara, is Rabba. His full name is Rabba Bar Nachmani. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in one of the main academies in Babylonia in the days of the Amoraim. We're talking here the years during the 4th century CE. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in Fum Bedita for 22 years. So he's one of the greatest Hachamim in the Gemara, and he takes a deep dive into the thinking of the Torah. Why does the Torah say, a person admits partial liability, he must be forced to make an oath? What's the thinking there? Why did the Torah say, if a person, a defendant, admits part of the liability, in our case, Shimon says, I don't know 100, but I do owe 50, right? We say, what's the halacha? Yishava. He pays the 50 and he has to make a shavua. Why? Why does he have to make a shavua? So here it is. Human psychology. Hazaka. Generally speaking, if Shimon really owes him money, he's not going to have the chutzpah, if I may, to just say, I owe you nothing. He's not going to say, I don't owe you. Now the truth is, he wants to walk away. He would like to say, I owe you nothing. Obviously, he doesn't want to pay his debt. Now, but he's not going to say, I owe you nothing, because it would take a special type of deranged individual to just say, I owe you nothing. Reuven lent him $100, and now he's going to say, you owe me nothing? That's the presumption of human psychology. Does it work all the time? No, there is always psychopaths. There's always people on the spectrum who don't follow the general rule, but the general rule of human behavior. Somebody made you a loan. You're not going to say it never happened. So if that's the case, if Reuven made him a $100 loan to Shimon, then Shimon should say, yeah, I owe $100. He's not going to say it. Is just the reason he won't admit the full liability. He's not going to deny anything. He's not going to say, I don't owe you anything. He won't do that. But he's not going to admit the full liability. He's trying to buy time. He's trying to delay it. He wants to be in a situation, please, next to me. He wants to be in a situation where he can get more time. So what's he going to do? He's going to say, look, I owe you $50. So he's going to pay 50. He's not going to owe you nothing. That he's not going to do. He's not going to say, I owe you 100, because he doesn't have the money, and he's trying to delay. I owe you 50. You see what he's doing? You understand that?
What do you base out of that? Like, what's the conclusion of this person's character? Like,
Right, so the person's character is a regular person. Regular person. Somebody does you a favor, he gives you money, you're thankful. Thank you so much for helping me. Now he says, can you pay me back? You're not going to say, you never made me a loan. And now he brings you, what? Pay me back. You don't have the money. He brings you to court. Now you're in court. You don't have the money. What are you going to do? So you're not going to say, I don't owe him anything. That's your ayah. The dayanim are there. The rabbis are there. And you can say, I don't owe him nothing. A regular person with a conscience doesn't act like that. So you'll lie. You'll make a small lie. In your mind, you're saying, you know what? I'm gonna say I owe him $50. Later on, I'll give him the other 50. See, that's normal psychology. That's a normal person. That's a type of lie that a normal person who's in distress will make, right? So again, he's not going to admit the full $100 liability. He's trying to delay it, and later on he wants to pay him. Savar, he's saying in his mind, eventually I'll get the money, and I'll pay him back. Now you see the wisdom of the Torah. The Torah understands human psychology. The Amara Hamana, Hashem said in the Torah, if he admitted part of the liability, there's a good chance that he actually owes the entire liability. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. Make a shavua. If he said, I owe nothing, okay, apparently he owes nothing. Most people are not going to lie and say, I owe nothing, okay? If he says, I owe part of it, okay, Hashem says, I see through this person's mind. Force him to make a shavua. Let him vow that he owes nothing. Ve'amar ha'chamana rameh shevuah aleh ki hechi delodeh le bechuleh. We want him to admit that he owes a full liability, if indeed he owes a full liability. So that's why, now you see the logic for compelling a person who admits a liability to make a shevuah. You see the logic now? Now let's take the same case. Take the case of Ribbi. What was the case of Ribbi? Who remembers? Two witnesses. They come in. He didn't admit it. He said nothing. He didn't admit it. Two witnesses come in and they say, you owe us $50. You owe the plaintiff, you owe the event $50. Okay. There's no psychology there. He didn't say a thing. He didn't say anything. What's the psychology? The whole psychological reason for saying Shimon is admitting part of the liability, he probably owes the entire amount. Let's figure that out. If two witnesses come in, we don't have any psychological information on Shimon's state of mind. And that's why, according to Rabbah, apparently it comes out that we cannot compel him to make a shevuah. The two witnesses can compel him to pay. They're there. They testified that he owes $50. He has to pay the $50, but they cannot compel him to make a shevuah because the underlying reasoning for the shevuah doesn't exist unless he himself admits part of the liability. You see the subtle point? So those are two ways, and it's teaching you how to think in a clear fashion. Once you learn how to think in a clear fashion, to analyze situations, you see through politicians. And I mean this on both sides. I'm not taking a position, you like this one, you like that one, but you see through all the rhetoric, and it becomes very boring to watch the nightly news. I'm being honest with you. So
he's using the psychological reasoning for his basic beliefs.
Right, so the Torah, when the Torah says, Modeh b'miksat ta'ana, hayav l'shava, when the Torah says, when God says, this person who admits part of the liability, he has to make a shevuah, because there's a good possibility that he actually owes the entire amount, and he's lying just to kind of buy more time. Right? That's why he's admitting part of the liability. It's a weird thing. When is going to court, you owe me $100. Why would Reuven say he owes him $100 if he owes him 50? But Shimon's saying, why would Shimon say he owes 50 if he owes 100? He can't pay. When a person can't pay, you're willing to lie a little. Right?
And did we, in that person, I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the sensitivity to, if we know that that's the circumstance, this is what we should do. We should put him in a situation of now swearing and being even more uncomfortable in his predicament.
Right. So again, always the underlying assumption is a person might lie in court, but he won't put his arm around the Sefer Torah and make a shevuah. There's a different thing, right? If the person might lie, fair enough. Nobody's crazy enough to take a shevuah. By the way, I think even in the modern, not everybody. I know there's all types of. Unfortunately, today morality has gone down. But an average person who comes to the knees, I can't imagine he would put his arm around the Sefer Torah and make a shevuah. Even today, I think there would be a little fear of doing that. But back then, it was far more serious.
So the sensitivity to his, for example, this is where the line is drawn.
Oh,
Justice has to.
No. You call that din itaha. There are situations where a poor person comes to court, but he owes the money. He has to pay. The Torah is unforgiving. By the way, the Torah meaning, when I say the Torah is unforgiving, first of all, establish the liability. If he owes the money, he owes the money. If he can't pay, he can't pay. We're not going to beat him. We're not going to, this. But we have to establish the fact. We have to establish the fact, right?
Get the justice first, and then after you deal with the
then, that's right. That's what the Gemara in Masechet Sanidim says. That David HaMelech, when there was that type of situation, a poor person was there, he would tell him, you have to pay. Then the poor person would say, but I don't have the money. He says, but it doesn't matter. The halakha is you have to pay. Then he would get his treasurer, and they would write the guy a check, give him the money, and he'd say, okay, now you go pay your debt. That's the correct way to do it. If you can, not all day, But the point is, establish the fact that the guy is owed the money, he's owed the money. You understand? Yes, sir, please.
I just missed this, but what would happen if the person who owed the debt said, "Oh, I do owe $100, but I can't pay."
So
because you're saying like buying time, so
all right.
can you not afford to
So according to halakha, the Torah, the Jewish law is very unforgiving, meaning if a person, it's interesting, the Jewish law is very forgiving and very compassionate to the poor in an amazing way, right? And it's very, there's a lot about how if a person is wealthy and well off, that it's a tremendous zechut to forgive the debt. It's tremendous zechut, meaning it's a tremendous mitzvah. If you know the guy can't pay you and you say, you know what, it's okay, I forgive you. Number one. Number two, every 7 years the debts are forgiven. So the Torah is very compassionate. But the law is the law. Meaning, I worked hard for my money. I made you a loan. Let's say diamonds. I'm in the diamond business. Diamonds, everything is done on trust. At least that's what I was told in Israel. So there's a lot. So now I gave you the diamonds and you lost them. You owe me $40,000. I lost them. It doesn't matter. You owe me $40,000. I feel bad that you lost the diamonds, right? But you owe me $40,000, right? The halakha is the halakha, right? There was a kinyan, there was an agreement, and he gave him the diamonds, and he's supposed to give him the money. Once he takes the diamonds, he becomes the owner of the diamonds, and there's a transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer, and at that point, the buyer is obligated to pay for the diamonds. He lost the diamonds. There was a situation, there was a case like that in Israel where the guy bought a large amount of diamonds. He says he lost it, and it was a whole big, thing. That's it. He has to pay. Now, if the guy who sold the diamonds, maybe he can't afford not to get paid. Maybe he has to pay his supplier, right?
But the person who owes the money, he's admitting he owes the money.
Yeah.
How does the timing work?
Oh, so the court would ask him to make an accounting of his assets. And they would never enter the house. According to Jewish law, you're not allowed to enter the person's house. It's a beautiful halacha. Bahus ta'amot, the pasuk says. You're not allowed to enter the debtor's house, but he should bring to you some of his assets, and they would do an auction, and they would sell the assets, and he would pay the debt.
They would do an auction.
They would do an auction. They would sell it.
So
I don't know if it was an auction. Maybe I'm misspeaking. They would sell it in public, right? Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is there is a reason for someone to lie.
Oh, right. Exact. Oh, yes. That's right. But there's a case in the Pele Yoes where there was a person who came to court and he really thought he didn't owe the money. He was a defendant, and the judge proved to him that he made a mistake. And he came to the judge and he said, "Thank you. I was having a lot of trouble in my life. I didn't know why, and now I know why." He said, "I owe the guy money. I don't want this money." Meaning, you're thinking it's very cruel to the poor person, and at some level it is. But you're also doing the guy a favor. He has money that doesn't belong to him. That's a kerala. Get rid of it. You don't want that money. If it doesn't belong to you, just get it out of your house and let them take it, and you'll suffer and whatever, and be done with it, and then go on in your life, start over again, whatever it is. So the Torah takes a very compassionate position, but it's a very real position. It's compassionate to both sides, right? All right. So again, just to summarize what we did until now, then we'll go to the continuing the Gemara, but just to summarize what we did until now. So we have the situation where if a person admits a partial admission of liability, or rather, an admission of partial liability, I owe 50, not 100, that's what the defendant says, Shimon says to the Oved, I owe you 50, I don't owe you 100. According to the Torah, he has to make a shivua. According to the Bichya, if two people come in and say you owe 50, not 100, he pays, of course, and he has to make a shivua. And the idea is, if his own admission would compel him to make a shivua, then the testimony of two witnesses should also compel him to make a shivua. Comes Rabbah. Rabbah doesn't say so explicitly. Rabbah just explained to us the psychology of the law of why a person's admission should compel him to make a shivua. But based upon the psychology, based upon what Rabbah explained, we can reach a conclusion that if two witnesses come and compel him to pay, they cannot also compel him to make a shivua, because the psychological profile of the person is a blank slate. We don't know what he's thinking and we didn't say anything, right? So those are the two positions. There's Rabbah and there is Rabbi Hiya. Okay? I didn't say what the halacha is. When we finish the Sugya, I will read to you the Pesach halacha of Rambam. Does he make Pesach like Rabbi Hiya? Does he make Pesach like Rabbah? That's later on. But for now, let's look at the a-fortiori reasoning. Okay? Umay kal v'chomer. What is exactly the a-fortiori reasoning? What is the basis for Rabbi Hiya's conclusion that if his own admission would compel a oath, then how much more so the testimony of two witnesses should compel an oath? What is that reasoning? And here it is. Umafiv she'en mechayevo mamon. We have his own testimony. His own testimony is light, right? It's light in the sense that the person who admits that he owes money has to pay the money, right? But it's a light premise, right? It's enough to make him liable to pay. and yet it's also enough to compel him to make an oath. If two witnesses come, again, I'm going to read it again because I didn't explain it well. If his own testimony cannot compel him to pay money that he didn't admit, it can only compel him to pay money that he did admit, right? So he says, I owe $50, we're not going to make him pay $100. He says he owes $50. So it's a light type of liability, his testimony. If two witnesses come, they can compel him to pay money that he didn't admit he owes, right? That's a very heavy thing. And how much more so the testimony of these two witnesses should compel him to make an oath.
The witnesses say he owes 50 or 100?
They say he owes 50. But
How
the
about
point
if they
is,
say 100?
he has to pay 100 then, but then he would have to make a shivua because there's nothing to make a shivua about, right? If they say the entire liability. But the point being that what makes the testimony of the witnesses heavy, a heavy premise, if I can use the a fortiori idea, is the fact that the witnesses can compel him to pay what he doesn't admit. Right? That's heavy. In his own admission, he pays only what he admits. He doesn't pay what he doesn't admit. If the witnesses come, they can force him to pay what he doesn't admit. So how much more so they should be able to force him to
So if
make
they
a
both
shabbat.
say 100 and he says 50, he has to pay 100?
He has to pay 100. Exactly. So now the Gemara, and I told you they're going to start analyzing the rhetoric, because rhetoric is just a tool. And I want to tell you something about rhetoric. Rhetoric is a way to express ideas. It's not the ultimate basis of truth. The ultimate basis of truth is an intelligent mind that knows how to think in a rational and perceptive manner, right? The way I express whatever I express doesn't matter. Look at debates. You always have debates on TV, which I don't watch so much because I don't find it to be intelligent debates, but Republicans and Democrats, right? So the Republican says ABC, the Democrat says XYZ. Nobody ever convinces anybody. It's all pretend. Nobody ever says, you're right, Joe Biden should be investigated like Donald Trump. Or on the other side, you're right, Donald Trump isn't so well behaved. He sometimes tends to speak a little, but again, I'm not saying, please do not, I am not making any point against Joe Biden, any point against Donald Trump. I don't care about politics. Please do not try to
Rabbi,
infer.
you care about politics.
I'm not anymore, because I realize the ship. You see the Titanic. I never saw the Titanic, but now that it's a movie and the ship is sinking and they're throwing the lifeboats, and come on, it's whatever. Okay. Okay. So we are all on the Titanic, and we have Hashem looking over us, and He sees we're in Knis studying Torah, and He's protecting us. So I don't care about the politicians anymore. I just don't.
Rabbi, you have rights.
What?
You have rights.
I have rights?
Yeah.
Okay. What are they?
Don't be scared of anyone.
I'm not. Thank God. Baruch Hashem. We have the protection of God. That's what we need. Right. So anyway, getting back to my point being that it's rhetoric. You never convince anybody. A person has a preconceived notion, and that's all that matters, is a preconceived notion. Rhetoric is a way of expressing truth. So now, let's look at the counter-argument, and we have about 5 minutes. We'll do a counter-argument against the a fortiori reasoning. Where are we? Okay. Okay. 1 second, I lost the place. Here it is. Ufiv en mechayevo mamon. What do you mean when you say that a person's admission is light because it doesn't compel him to pay? That's just not an accurate statement. If a person admits a liability, obviously, he must pay that liability. So this whole idea that a person's admission is light because it doesn't compel him to pay, but the two witnesses who come, they can compel him to pay, but that is incorrect. If a person says, I owe him $100, it's like 100 witnesses coming in and saying he owes him $100 is not better than a person himself saying, I owe him $100, right? So what do you mean when you say that it's a light premise because his admission is light because he can't compel himself to pay? Yes, he can compel himself to pay. If he says I owe the money, he owes the money and he has to pay. So let's look at the a fortiori reasoning again. My mamon kenas. Okay, let's be a little more precise. And we're going to now reformulate the kal vachomer. Umafiv she'en mechayevo kenas mechayevo shevua if a person's own admission will not compel him to pay a penalty, and yet it will compel him to make a shavua. If two witnesses come and they can compel him to pay a penalty, and how much more so that they should be able to compel him to make an oath. Let me explain that law. There is in Jewish law what's called kenas. Kenas means a penalty. A person has to pay a penalty under several situations, and I'll describe one of them just by way of example. And once I describe that one, you'll understand what type of penalties we're talking about. For example, robber Shimon goes into Reuven's house. He robs $100. Reuven takes him to court, and he says, "You robbed $100. I want it back." Reuven doesn't have any witnesses. Shimon says, "Prove it. I never entered your house. Prove it. Do you have any witnesses?" So the judge tells Shimon, "You're saying you don't own the money? You didn't rob?" "No, nothing." So he's machrish. He completely denies any liability. He says it never happened, didn't happen. Let's say the next day, Reuven comes to court, and he found two witnesses who saw the whole thing. They come to court, and now they bring Shimon to court, and the judge tells Yisachar and Zebulun, the names of the two witnesses, testify to what you saw. And they said, "We saw this person, Shimon. We saw him entering his house. We saw him leaving, and he had $100 in his hand." They saw it. Now, Shimon doesn't have to pay back $100. You know what he has to pay back? 200. That's called the kenas. It's a penalty. Now, if in the first day, Shimon would have admitted, and he would have said, "You know what, I robbed the money, I'm sorry, I apologize." How much would he have had to pay? 100. So his own testimony can only compel him to pay 100. He doesn't have to pay a penalty. It's light, right? But if two witnesses come and say, "We saw you robbing," there's a penalty, it's heavy. So if the two witnesses can compel him to pay not just the original amount he robbed, but can compel him to pay a penalty, how much more so that they can compel him to make a shavua? That's the correct a fortiori reasoning, and based upon that, Rabbi Hiya wants to say that the two witnesses should be able to force Shimon, the defendant, to make a shavua. One more line in the Gemara, and then we will finish. This is half the Sugya. Next week, Beli Neder, I believe, if we have a class, we will finish the second half of the Sugya. Ma lefiv sheken mechayevo korban, tomar be'erim she'en mechayevin oto korban. The a fortiori reasoning of the Kal Vachomer is demolished. They say, "Excuse me, you're trying to tell me that if he makes an admission, it's heavier, it's lighter than if two witnesses come." That is incorrect. If a person makes an admission, his admission can cause him to have liability to bring a korban. I will explain that in a moment. If two witnesses come in and they say, "We saw him doing this crime," that will not create liability for him to bring a korban. So therefore, the testimony of two witnesses is not heavier than an admission, but rather it is lighter than an admission. Again, the Kal Vachomer is destroyed. Let me explain to you what's happening here. What exactly is the situation that the Gemara is alluding to? There are crimes that if a person commits these crimes, the crime was committed beshogeg. Beshogeg means unintentionally or maybe unknowingly. And I'll give you an example of a crime that is committed unknowingly or unintentionally. In that case, he has to bring a korban hatat. That's the punishment for certain crimes. Primarily crimes where if he did it b'mezid, it would have been karet. Then he does it b'shogeg, he does it by accident, or not by accident, unintentionally. The punishment is a korban hatat. Example, person wakes up in the morning, forgets that it's Shabbat, and he starts driving. He's shomer Shabbat. He doesn't drive on Shabbat. But he forgot that it's Shabbat and he drove. That's a crime. That's in Judaism. That's punishable by karet or sekila. But in this case, he forgot. Now, if he goes to court and he tells the judges, "Look, I just realized I did this terrible thing. I don't know what to do. I drove on Shabbat." What would the judges tell him to do? Bring a korban. Bring a korban, say vidui, hatati, aviti, pashati, and be done with it. If two witnesses would have come to court and they would have said, "We saw this guy driving on Shabbat," and the guy says, "No, never happened, but we know, we saw you driving. You probably, we were sure it was a shogeg. You probably didn't know you were driving." No, it's just not true. They can't cause him to bring a korban, right? They cannot force him. So his own testimony is actually stronger than the testimony of two witnesses. His admission would be enough to compel him to bring a korban, but the testimony of two witnesses will not be enough to let him bring a korban. So therefore, you can't give me a kal vachomer that if his admission forces him to bring a shavua, the testimony of two witnesses should compel a shavua. That's an improper kal vachomer. For a kal vachomer to work, you have to have a heavy premise and a light premise. Here, actually, it's the reverse. His admission is heavier than the testimony of the two witnesses. We're going to continue this next week. We'll finish this again next week. Are there any questions, comments, or does anybody want to make ask for a clarification or something? I'll be happy to give it. Gentlemen, this class will be on YouTube in about a day or two, so you'll hear it a second time on YouTube. Let him ask the question, then we will adjourn.
In the court of law.
I'm sorry?
Here, in the court of law.
Here.
When you come in, you take an oath. Is that the same?
Don't make an oath. Don't make an oath. I think you have the right to. Yeah, you have a right not to make an oath. Correct? What is that called? Affirmation. Make an affirmation. Yeah, exactly. Don't do it. Just don't even say I make an oath. Affirmation. I affirm. But technically it is, because it doesn't matter what language you make it in. Yeah, it is. Yes, that is. That is. Yes. Gentlemen, let us count the Omer. Shalom. And then we'll say Kaddish. Actually,